RotoWire WNBA show where we talk about fantasy basketball. Today is Friday, May 10th. I'm Jason Shabilsky alongside Kieran Sprecher. Today we'll be discussing our preseason takeaways with the regular season just around the corner, including the new look Storm and Nelissa Smith's impressive performance last night. We'll also talk more draft strategy, including sleepers and breakout candidates that we're targeting in the mid to late rounds of fantasy drafts. And we'll close out by talking about some of the storylines we're monitoring ahead of the regular season. Those looking to test out RotoWire's tools as the regular season gets underway can visit rotowire.com/try. And since it is draft season, live viewers can feel free to chime in with any draft questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. Kieran, it's hard to believe that the regular season is less than a week away. What stood out to you about the past few days of preseason action?
All right. Well, going back to Tuesday, I was kind of interested that Victoria Vivians was the Seattle Storm's fifth starter. You got Lloyd, you got Diggins Smith, Ezzy, and NECA, like we mentioned. They're kind of forming that third super team in the WNBA. So it's kind of interesting who's going to be that fifth starter. Probably reap a lot of statistical benefits playing with that starting unit. And Vivians gets the first crack over players like Sammy Whitcombs, Joyner Holmes, Jordan Horston, and Mercedes Russell, who've all played pretty big roles for Seattle in the past or for other teams in the past. So kind of interested or like surprised to see Vivians getting that start. I do think Seattle will be able to manipulate lineups. The aforementioned players like all have different unique skill sets that they can plug and play based on the matchup and however that team, like whatever team they're facing or whatever they're struggling with, they have players to like swap in and out. So kind of interested about where that fifth starter is going to go come the regular season and throughout the season. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But I don't think Vivians is like set in stone as the fifth starter for the entire season. So I think that'll be moved around. Phoenix is starting lineup, veterans all across the board. One of the oldest teams in the W. It's just a matter if they can stay healthy for me. I don't know if you have any concerns about Phoenix's health. They're healthy so far. Griner is a foot injury popped up during the preseason, so it's already kind of starting. On paper, that's a really good team. It'll just be it'll just be a matter of if they can like stay healthy throughout the season to put up strong numbers.
Yeah, like you said, Phoenix on paper looks like they could be among the ranks of the WNBA super teams, but really, like it starts with Diana Taurasi. She's one of the WNBA's goats, no question. But past season, in a few of the past seasons, she's just struggled to stay healthy, which is is her main detractor both in real life and in fantasy these days. So if she can stay healthy and if the rest of that lineup can stay healthy, they have the chance to really make a strong push as Diana Taurasi winds down her career.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's just like it was kind of surprising to actually see them all together. Like we've talked about Copper coming over, we talked about Cloud coming over. Griner's back after her first season. Like she returned from Russia last year and played a little bit, was a little bit limited, but she should be full go this year. Taurasi was injured for a lot of this year. Cunningham was injured for a lot of last year. So we're finally getting to see them on the court together, and it's like, oh, maybe this team could be something. The other game from Tuesday, the biggest standout for me was Angel Reese. Man, I doubted what she could do offensively in the WNBA. She's shutting me up real quick. Super surprising. I'm happy to see it for her. And then the other storyline in Chicago is like Dana Evans or Marina Mabrey, right? Like there's room with Copper gone. There's room for one of those players to take a huge step forward, or maybe both of them. So how those two guards like produce at the beginning of the season is going to be super interesting for me to watch.
Yeah, Chicago this year, I think, will really be looking for shooters. They have Dana Evans who can shoot. They have Marina Mabrey who can shoot. But I think Angel Reese, if she can really develop her shot and put points on the board, I think that'll be a really good aspect for them. And for all of the talk about the Sky rebuilding, I still think that it will be a struggle for them to keep up offensively this year. But I mean, they did beat the Liberty by 50 points. So the magic of the preseason, and just another reminder not to look too much into some of the things that are out there.
Yeah, and speaking of the Liberty, I'm curious to see what the Liberty's bench is going to look like heading into the regular season. We know who the starters are going to be. They're returning everyone. They should all play close to 30 minutes. They're all very good players that'll put up numbers, but they kind of lost some reserve production last year. Marine Jonas, I don't know how to say her name, but I call her MJ. She's fantastic. The way that she shoots the three is super exciting. It's Caitlin Clark-esque. She won't be in the W this year. Stephanie Dolson has moved on. So those two were two of the Liberty's three like most minutes played off the bench last year. So it's really going to be interesting to see where they go when they get into foul trouble or if they need to give some of those veterans some rest. Caitlin Thornton is back. She's what isn't like a super productive player, but she should get plenty of minutes. Kennedy Burke and Nuria Sabali have both rested both preseason games, which is kind of surprising. Dokic came over from Seattle. She got cut from Seattle this offseason, which was kind of surprising. She had a pretty solid season with them last year. I was kind of expecting her to get some run. And then there's Leonie Fibic, who's still overseas. 6'4", can shoot the three. She shot 44% on 6.1 attempts per game overseas. So she could be a really dynamic piece off the bench for the Liberty. But there's a lot of moving parts, and it's not like the biggest storyline because it's not going to like have the biggest impact. The Liberty are going to ride that starting lineup as long as they can. But it will be interesting. They're going to need to have some bench production to stay strong throughout the regular season.
Yeah, if Dokic can make this roster and do something similar to what she did last year, I'm really intrigued to see what she can do off the bench. Last year, her tenure with Seattle was a bit short-lived because she went back overseas toward the end of the season. And especially with the Olympic break, it gives me some concern that maybe she won't play the full season for the Liberty if she does make the roster. But if she can carve out a role off the bench, I'm excited to see what she can do.
Definitely. And then one more other interesting starting lineup switch that I wasn't really expecting. Mariah Jefferson was out last night with the injury, and Tasha Harris got the start over Rachel Banham and Tiffany Mitchell. Harris was not great in the game. That doesn't mean that one bad game is going to move her all the way down the depth chart by any means. But Banham was really good. She made 6 threes and scored 20 points, and Mitchell was 3 for 4 from the field in 18 minutes. We don't really know what the significance of Jefferson's injury is, right? They got a couple days until the regular season comes around, and they have to like actually release another injury report. But Jefferson's injury is definitely something to monitor, and the repercussions of that if Tasha Harris remains in the starting lineup, if Mitchell or Banham get a chance, there could be some fantasy production there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really encouraged by last night's Dream Fever game. It was good to see Tina Charles in the starting lineup, first and foremost. She's one of the biggest question marks in my eyes heading into the season. And I think for a lot of people, she's a question mark. Her talent is undeniable, but she had some rocky ends to her 10 years in Phoenix and in Seattle. So there's just like questions about her role, but if she handles a starting role, which it looks like she will, it's really encouraging for fantasy managers. She played 18 minutes last night, which led the Atlanta starters, and she had 10 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, and a steal. And if you're able to get her around like somewhere between round 4 and 6, like I love that value. She's a former MVP, and if she can keep doing that sort of level of production, I'm really excited to see what she can do in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I think Tina Charles, for me, like she'll probably be limited at some point. She may rest some games. But I think that even if she's only playing 23 to 25 minutes a game and she takes every 5th game off, I think there's a lot of fantasy value there. Like and there may be an argument to be made that if she is getting that rest, she may be even more productive when she is playing, type of deal. So yeah, I'm happy with snatching her up in those middle rounds. But I would be a little hesitant. I don't think that like she really could like explode to like a top 20 player just because of some of those limitations.
Right. I think that her days of being an MVP contender are probably behind her. She's 35 years old, so kind of similar like to Diana Taurasi, we were discussing earlier. Maybe she just gets some veteran rest days, which is understandable. But if she can carve out a role, she's a really intriguing fantasy option. Caitlin Clark was relatively inefficient, going 2 for 9 from beyond the arc, but she still had 8 rebounds and 6 assists. So she's showing what she can do outside of the scoring column. And the Fever really rallied around her and picked her up. Nalissa Smith had 21 points to go with 6 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block. And 4 starters scored in double figures for Indiana. So it feels like this is finally a team that will have multiple players capable of carrying the team on any given night, which is encouraging after the past few disappointing seasons for them.
Yeah, obviously the inefficiencies for Clark to start are like a little to be expected. She had, I think, like 5 or 6 turnovers last night too. And the good thing in fantasy is you don't get negative points for that, right? So and the Fever are going to let her play through those mistakes. I was a little concerned. I heard some reports that the coaches were asking her to shoot more mid-range jumpers instead of the super deep threes. I don't like that. The contested mid-range jumper is the worst shot in basketball. It doesn't matter if you're male or female or 8 years old or 25 years old or 45 years old. You should be shooting threes. That's how you win games. Look at the Cleveland Cavaliers last night with the upset over Boston Celtics. They shot 50% from 3. That's why they won. Everyone with their think pieces and everything can, you can analyze every part of that game you want. The reason the Cavs won is because they made their 3-pointers. Clark shooting those super deep threes makes it easy for Nalissa Smith to dominate the paint because she takes all of that attention away. When she gets a screen set 35 feet away, you got to bring 3 defenders 30 feet away from the basket. And then you have Nalissa Smith. You have the front court options that can score. I think the Fever are really well-rounded. We'll get to it a little bit later, but the Kelsey Mitchell injury is a little concerning. Having that type of veteran presence in the backcourt would really help Caitlin, especially with her shot selection. So I think Kelsey Mitchell's injury is definitely something to monitor, but the Fever are strong, and they're one of my standout teams heading into the regular season for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with just 2 preseason games left, that means the regular season is right around the corner and draft season is entering the final weekend. So let's talk about some sleepers that we're targeting in this year's draft. The full list for people who want to follow along, like on a computer or a phone, can be found at rotowire.com/WNBA. I touched on this earlier in the show, but I really like Tina Charles's potential this year. She's a front court option for Atlanta, and her ranking in the 40s reflects the risk associated with the pick. So there's the age factor, there's the behind the scenes factor of the rocky ending to her time in Phoenix that was kind of abrupt. But if she can stay on the court relatively often and have a good relationship with the Dream, she could be one of the best values in fantasy drafts this year. It feels crazy to be talking about a former MVP as a mid-round pick. And really, if you look at her 2021 stat line, and 2022 for that matter, if you didn't know about the behind-the-scenes like relationships, you would think that nothing was wrong. So I think that if she's able to stay on the court under her former teammate and coach Tanisha Wright, I really like her potential.
Yeah, as I discussed earlier, there's a little bit of the veteran, rest days, but I totally think that she's a breakout candidate. My first breakout candidate, got to go a little bit farther down the ADP list. Karlie Samuelson is going undrafted in a lot of mocks. And she's been a starter throughout the postseason for the Mystics. I know, like you said, can't look too much into what's happening during the preseason, but some of the nuggets can be telling. And I'm with Elena Deladon not playing this year, there's a ton of minutes and a ton of production to go around. And Samuelson does a little bit of everything. Last night, she made 3 threes. She grabbed 3 boards. She dished out 3 assists, and she had a steal. Putting up that type of production as one of your final picks in your draft is fantastic. I think, Hines Allen, Aaliyah Edwards, Walker Kimbrell, Edwards is a rookie. The other 2 are veterans. They'll push Samuelson for playing time off the bench. But I feel like if right now you got to take Samuelson and take take advantage of that value you're getting and that production you're getting right away as a starter. Even if you use one of your final picks on a player like Samuelson, you start her for a couple weeks and then you see your playing time drop. It's super easy to release and find another player off the waivers when you're like dropping your last pick, right? Like you don't want to like hold on to your 8th and 9th picks and be like, oh, I think they're going to break out eventually. Like you need to use those for roster manipulation and fantasy, and you need to be able to find players on the waiver wire, and you need to be able to do that sort of thing. So I feel like Samuelson is the perfect late round pick where you can get some value for a couple weeks, and then when you've kind of figured out where your team is heading, you can drop her or you can trade her or you can manipulate your roster with her if you use one of your last picks on her.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of talked about this in Monday's show as well, but speaking of not reading too much into the preseason, I really like Jaelyn Brown's production. So Jaelyn Brown is kind of my preseason overreaction that I'm letting myself have at this point. She can be had at tremendous value in fantasy drafts. And if she can carve out a starting role to start the year with Satu Sabali out, I really like her potential. She was really good in the scoring column. She was good on the boards during the Wings preseason opener, and she has some experience as a professional under her belt. She's been playing overseas over the past few years after graduating following the 2019-2020 season. So if she can carry that over and be a little bit of a hybrid like veteran / rookie presence in the locker room, which is something that you sometimes get in the WNBA. I think that she's a really intriguing option. Fantasy managers should probably temper some expectations because Satu Sabali, as long as her health, as long as her rehab stays on track, she should be back after the Olympic break for the second half of the season. So you might have to play without Jaelyn Brown as a fantasy contributor down the stretch. But if she can get you to the playoffs and to maybe even the championship in your fantasy leagues, I like her as a late round pick.
Just for clarification purposes, are we positive that she is actually in the ESPN system now? Because I remember, I think we did a mock draft the day after her breakout performance, and no, it wasn't a mock; it was the RotoWire draft, and she wasn't quite in the system yet. So if you're drafting, be aware that may be a thing. And then if your draft ends, be sure to be checking the waiver wire to see when her name pops up, because I do think she's on the inside track to making this roster. And if she makes the roster, there's a reason she makes it, and that's going to be because she's going to play. They aren't just going to have her to be the 15th player, 14th player, and not get any PT. So I definitely agree with that and like that. But there is one little caveat that you might not be able to find her when you search her name yet.
Yeah, I did check this morning. She is in there now.
Okay. That's good. I just wanted to make sure that would be an important piece of information to have. And that just shows you how deep we're going, man. We got these sleepers in before the system even has them in.
Mm-hmm.
So going to Chicago, I think we've mentioned multiple times that with Copper gone, with them like in full rebuild mode now, there's a ton of production to be had for multiple players. I know you want to touch on Mabrey quick, and then I'll talk about Evans.
Yeah, so last year, Kalia Copper and Marina Mabrey were really driving the Sky offense. And this year, it feels like it's kind of Mabrey's team to lead. Really, throughout her career, she's been overshadowed by some really strong other contributors. She started her career in Los Angeles. They had Nneka Onwumike. She went to Dallas. They had Arike Ogunbowale. She comes to Chicago. They have Kalia Copper. So everywhere she's gone, she's been productive, but she's still kind of been that secondary option on the team. And now it feels like she can really take on the leading role that will allow her to exit the conversation of being like a productive mid-round player to maybe being among the elite ranks of the fantasy players. So I'm really excited to see what she can do. She's someone I think that I've wound up with her in most of the drafts that I do. As you know, I'm someone who targets front court early in drafts. And so guard help can be a little bit hard to come by in mid rounds, but if Mabrey is sitting there around like round 4, round 5, I'm absolutely taking her. I have no reservations about that this year.
And a little bit of data to back up your claims that she could ascend to the top of the WNBA players in only 23 minutes against the Liberty. I know the Liberty starters, only one of them, Stewie, was the only one who played more than 20 minutes. In that giant blowout of the Sky had over the Liberty, Mabrey put up 20 points, 7 of 12 shooting, made 4 3-pointers, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, and 1 block. And again, that's in only 23 minutes. So the per minute production is definitely there. Obviously, she probably won't be playing against as many backups during the regular season, but the potential is totally there. Going to Dana Evans, a lot of the same reasoning why Evans is a great player, a great sleeper candidate this year, goes to Mabrey. And you talked about Copper and then Mabrey, and maybe this year it's Mabrey and then Evans, and Evans has that that next step to her. I think Mabrey definitely has way higher upside, but she's also going a couple rounds earlier, where I think Evans has maybe just a lower upside, but she's worth taking 2 or 3 rounds earlier, reaching for her. In that same blowout game, Evans put up 19 points, 8 of 12 shooting, made 2 3-pointers, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. She did have 5 turnovers too, but like we said, that doesn't negatively impact her. Another huge stat for Evans that I really like is she played at least 25 minutes 11 times last year. So that kind of when you get more minutes when you're a bench player, that normally means you're playing well, right? They keep you out there in games that you're playing well. So obviously, the more minutes you play, the better production you have. But I could see her playing around 28 minutes or so. So I feel like this is a pretty reasonable expectation to have for her. Last year, she averaged 13 points, 4 assists, and a steal in the 11 times she played over 25 minutes. That's great production for where she's going in drafts, which is like around pick 50. I would be fine taking her in like pick 38, pick 39, pick 40 sort of deal. Definitely want to reach on both of those Sky backcourt players because they're going to be leading the team this year for sure.
Yeah, and Dana Evans is really someone who has earned her spot on this team. She came off the bench over the past few seasons, but her efforts were not overlooked off the bench. She was a really strong 6th player for the team, and now that she has earned a starting spot, even though the Sky are rebuilding and have a lot of new faces around, Dana Evans is someone who I think will really be able to take on a leadership role alongside Marina Mabrey in the backcourt. So I'm really excited to see her in action as a starter. Rounding out my picks for breakout candidates is Shakira Austin, center for the Washington Mystics. Elena Deladon is unfortunately stepping away from basketball, which means that Shakira Austin's usage should maybe go through the roof even. She showed plenty of promise last year, averaging 10 points and 7 rebounds. Availability is one of the biggest concerns for me when it comes to Austin. She only made 19 appearances last year because of her hip issue. She dealt with it throughout the offseason, underwent surgery. She was cleared a few weeks ago, but it wouldn't surprise me if she has some limitations to start the year. So I think that it'll be a real test in patience for fantasy managers if they draft Shakira Austin, that maybe she's a little bit slow coming out of the gates. Maybe they manage her workload, but if she can get back to her full potential sooner rather than later, I think that fantasy managers will really be pleased with her production.
Yeah, there's some concerns about, being limited or whatever throughout the season, but where she's going in drafts, I feel like we're way overcompensating for her being limited, right? Like where she's going in drafts, it would be like someone made a report that she's only going to play 12 minutes a game. And yeah, we assume she's going to be limited a little bit, but I would assume she's still going to be playing at least 20 minutes and starting. So she's definitely a breakout candidate this year. And even more so if she can prove that she's 100% healthy and play close to 25, 30 minutes. Rounding out mine, I'm going with Lexie Brown, guard from the Sparks. We talked about Chicago being in rebuild mode. The Sparks are also in rebuild mode. So it's the same story. There's room and production for these players to soak up. And Lexie Brown was on pace for a career high season last year, got cut short due to an illness. Not really sure what exactly happened, but it was an ongoing illness that knocked her out for like a couple weeks at first, and then she tried to come back, and then she got shut down for the remainder of the season. So I think she's completely past that. She signed in a 2-year extension this offseason, which would signify that like the Sparks are like, we want you to be a part of this rebuild. We want you to be that kind of like the veteran presence in this rebuild. We want you to be a productive player for us. We think you're fully healthy. So that signing of the extension is a really good like indicator of like how the organization views her, right? And I expect her to just pick up right where she left off last year with that production. And it wouldn't be a shock to like see her even take another step forward. I know that everyone wants to talk about Cameron Brink and Rika Jackson, the latter of which who hasn't even started in the postseason yet, which is a little concerning. But in 12 appearances last year, Lexie Brown started 11 of them, and she averaged 12 points, 2.5 assists, 2 boards, and a steal per game, and she shot 42% from three-point land. If you've been following this pod at all for the infancy of it, our first couple of shows, you realize how much I love 3-point shooting. And so she attempted 5.5 threes a game and shot 40%. That is just extreme value right there. Like you get an extra point if you make a three in fantasy. And so there's just no reason for a player that has that sort of upside, right? That's attempting 6 3-pointers and shooting 40% for her to drop this far in drafts and being taken in like the 50th, 60th round. I think that her upside, like I don't think she can be a top 15 player in fantasy. I don't think there's that high of an upside, but I think she's well deserving of going a couple rounds earlier than her ADP right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like she's ready to kind of take on a leading role in that backcourt. So I'm excited to watch her this year. All right, and shifting our focus from draft talk to some regular season talk. The regular season starts Tuesday, May 14th. Kieran, what's one storyline that you're monitoring ahead of the regular season?
Well, like I alluded to earlier, Kelsey Mitchell is the biggest. Her ankle injury is like the biggest storyline for me. Caitlin Clark is obviously the biggest story of the regular season, and her teammate who led the Fever in scoring last year is going to be a big part of Clark's development. If Mitchell is not available to start the regular season, I think Clark's efficiency issues from the preseason will continue. And if Mitchell is not available, I think the Fever may struggle to like win some games that they should because they don't have that veteran experience yet. I think that the Fever are still a good team without her, but I don't think that they are really like contenders, which I do think they can be if Mitchell is healthy. So it'll be interesting to watch Mitchell's status over the next couple of days to see if she's available and if she'll be limited at all and how that'll impact the Fever.
Yeah, for sure. Sticking on the injury train, I'm closely monitoring Jordin Canada's hand injury. She was named the starting point guard during the preseason, but she also has her right hand injury that she's dealing with. It's kept her out for both of Atlanta's preseason games, which is really discouraging. And the dream trading for Crystal Dangerfield only makes me more nervous. Dangerfield does provide some stability in the backcourt, but she isn't as consistent as Canada. Jordin Canada is ranked number 40 right now in my rankings, but you look at the names after her on the draft board, and that's when it really starts to get interesting now that the regular season is coming up and she's still hurt. Doka Juhas is right behind her. I think I would pick Juhas. Tina Charles is there. I think I would go Charles over Canada. Lexie Brown, Alana Smith, Diamond Miller, Shakira Austin. I think I would pick all of them over Jordin Canada at this point until there's more information. I think Mariah Jefferson is where it starts to get murky for me, and I think that I would lean toward picking Canada in that case. But it's just one of those things that it's an unknown heading into the regular season, which you never like as a fantasy manager.
And a hand injury for a point guard is never a good thing. She has to dribble all the time. She has to play make. She has to shoot all the things that she's good at. So even if she comes back, there might be some, like rust, not being able to handle the ball for the last couple of weeks. So definitely concerning injury. But and like you said, like there's a handful of players you're probably taking over her now, but I wouldn't drop her all the way down the rankings, even if she misses a week. Like that's that's terrible for your fantasy team. You might lose the first week because you had a middle round pick out. But once she's available, she should put up significant numbers and still be worthy of, a top 5, 6, 7 pick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rounds 5, 6, 7 round pick.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and that wraps up today's show. Monday at 1 p.m. Central, we'll be back again. We'll close out draft season talk for the year. We'll talk about the regular season, and we'll talk about maybe some players who are being drafted a little bit earlier than we would like to see them. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you later.
Talk to you later, Jason.